Okay, wonderful. Let's go ahead and start off with some questions. Whoever is someone, preferably someone who has not already asked a question, we can go ahead and run through those first. And then after that, we can talk about arrivals and departures if we have time. If not, it's not a big deal. We can always do arrivals and departures on the Monday meeting. So, who is someone who has not asked a question? If you haven't, if there's no one that exists today that hasn't asked a question, then we can go from there. So who hasn't asked a question that would like to ask something? Don't be shy. There's plenty of time for everyone to get their questions answered.
Maybe I have a question to ask Toby.
Yep.
I was told by my DP, which happens to be the owner of the place where I rent the planes here in New York,
Yep.
that basically the check ride is based on three different kinds of approaches, right? So let's say an ILS, localizer, and the nav approach, right? Yeah. So basically, what's the difference when it comes to the check ride between the ILS approach and the localizer? Because it's this, even the approach plate is pretty much the same. So I do the whole thing exactly the same. The only difference is the minimums that I would change, or that I think that's a interesting question in terms of because the RNAV and the ILS completely different, but the ILS and the localizer, is it going to be like literally the same thing done twice?
Sure. You ask a very good question. I'm going to show you the answer to that question. So I'm going to share my screen and we're going to go over here to ForeFlight. And here is an instrument approach procedure that I was looking at this morning with the previous class. So this approach here is both an ILS runway 30 and it's a localizer runway 30. So basically you have two separate approaches built into one procedure, right? Or one instrument approach plate. So the way we do this is very simple. So on an ILS versus a localizer, there are certain things that distinguish one from the other. So, for example, on an ILS approach must have a localizer. Cool, we got that, right? It must have a glide slope. Cool, we got that. It must have um, uh, some kind of final approach intercept point where the glide slope meets a specific altitude. It must have a lightning bolt, as they call it, right here, and an altitude to maintain, and so on. Right? There's some things that it has to have. It also must have a decision altitude, which is different than an MDA, right? Now, I could pull up in the regulations and show you in the AIM exactly all the individual things that could be considered the components of an ILS. In fact, I may have it on my iPad here. If I go to books here, I may have an example. Let's see. Okay, so here is the Instrument Pilot Oral Exam Guide. Everyone in the United States should have this book, hands down. You need this book. Oops, let me see here. Done. Okay. I'm going to go to the uh, contents search book. Let's say components. And let's see if we can find the components of an ILS. Okay, here we go. What are the basic components of a standard ILS? That is the question. The answer is in the AIM 119. So you must have guidance information, which is a localizer and a glide slope. Easy enough. You must also have range information, which could be marker beacons or DME or something to that nature. And you must also have visual information, such as approach lights, touchdown lights, runway lights, those types of things. So the basic components of a standard ILS include these things. Now, not every ILS has exactly each identical point or each identical component, and not every localizer. Some have extras, right? Some have, fancier lights than others. But these are the basic components. So a localizer approach misses some of those components, which makes them completely different. I mean, I'll ask a question. John, are you still in here?
Yep, still here.
So, John, you can tell us about this. You fly a localizer approach completely differently than you fly an ILS, correct?
Correct.
Exactly. It's not the same procedure at all. I mean, an ILS is significantly easier to fly than a localizer approach because it gives you the vertical guidance and there's no MDA to level off at. So, now we understand that there are some basic components. Let's look and see how those components line up on this plate. So I see here that lake is my initial approach fix. It is both an intersection. It's an intersection from the radial off of this VOR, the 023 radial, where that radial intersects the localizer, as well as where it intersects the 128 radial from this VOR here. So it is it's a multi-point intersection. It's also an outer marker. That's what this little oval shape here is. It's the outer marker. When you fly over an outer marker and you have your markers on your audio panel set to where the sound is turned on, when you cross over that point, you will hear a doot, 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 doot sound. That's the dash in Morse code. And the little blue light on your audio panel, on your marker beacon instrument in your airplane, should flash. That's indicating that you would be at the, say, the final approach fix for a localizer. So the way you check yourself on an ILS is if you join the glide slope and you are on the localizer and on the glide slope and you hear the outer marker is located right here, then you should be at 2615 on your altitude. You can use that to kind of cross-check to make sure your instruments are correct, to make sure you know exactly where you are on the procedure. Does that make sense? I'm going to go with yes on that. Okay, cool. So that's an example right there. Now, if I was to simply fly this procedure like an ILS, I get vectors around, let's say I'm going to close off some of these markings that I have. And air traffic control were to vector me around here and then this way and then this way. And they said, air traffic control said, November, 1234, you're 3 miles from lake, fly heading, 300, whatever, maintain 2,700 until established localizer, cleared ILS, runway 30 approach, or something like that. Then you'd read that back and you would join a localizer. On the localizer, level at 2,700 feet, you would maintain that until you intercept the glide slope. The glide slope intercept point is here. Now you wonder, how do you know where this is? There's no mileage markers on this. Tell me, how do you know where this point is located?
Isn't that supposed to be the green diamond that starts coming down?
Yes,
Glide slope intersection.
yes. It is not an actual point that you can find on a GPS. It is simply the point in space where you are when the glide slope needle centers and you are at 2,700. That is the point right here. You can't find it on a GPS. But once you begin descending on the glide slope and you start going down, you'll eventually hit the outer marker. And when you hit the outer marker, you will have already descended and you should be at 2,615 on your altimeter. So you can check that. Cool, you know where you're at. Oops. From that point, you will continue your descent all the way down until when? What is this point right here?
This approach.
Yes, and what is that particular point called? Like right?
That's the decision altitude, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
That is your decision altitude on the ILS, which comes out to being 1208. So when you hit 1208 on the glide slope, you are right there, and it is now it is now time to either land, right? Or execute the missed approach procedure. Fair enough? Cool. That's how you fly an ILS. Now, let's look at the localizer. It's completely different. On the localizer approach, let's say that air traffic control gave you vectors just in the same exact way. You know, you go over here, they vectored you around and did this and put you here. And they said, you know, you're 5 miles from lake, fly heading 310, maintain 2,700 until established on the localizer, cleared localizer, runway 30 approach. You read it back, you join the localizer, and you are now here, flying this way. You're
Right.
gonna
So far it's exactly the same like the ILS until that point, right?
exactly.
Okay.
So flying along, you're level at 2,700, and you're gonna stay level at 2,700 until when? Until you get to here, the lake outer marker. You will stay level at 2,700. How do you identify lake? Let's say you don't have a GPS. All you have is, you know, nav radios and marker beacons. How do you identify lake?
Needles are centered, both needles.
The distance.
Couple ways to do it. Let me pull this up on here.
So Toby, basically in the localizer approach, you don't get the green diamond coming down on
Correct.
the
Correct. Now, I'll tell you, you may see the green diamond coming down if the glide slope still works, right? But if you were cleared for the localizer approach, you would ignore the green diamond coming down. You would disregard it.
Yeah, that was going to be another question. Can I use that green diamond as an advisory, or it's illegal to do that? I have to totally disregard that.
So it's a great question. Legally, you disregard. However, if you can follow the green diamond down and remember to level off at the minimum descent altitude, which is say here, and stay level until your missed approach point where you go missed, then I don't see a problem with it. However, I will advise you of something. I will advise you that your examiner probably wants to see you fly without the glide slope. It's possible. So I would practice both ways. But I remind you, if you fly the glide slope down, it will make you feel like you're on an ILS. And since your brain thinks, oh, I'm on the glide slope, I'm on an ILS, then you might not level off at 1400. You might get to 1400 and then try to make a decision because you're used to flying decisions on ILSs, right? Whenever you have a glide slope, you usually have a decision, right? So you would say, oh, well, I'm here at, I'm going to change my color. I'm here at 1400. I'm just going to start to go miss now. When you shouldn't do that, you should just level off. You might think you're on an ILS simply because you have a glide slope. So be careful to not get yourself confused. I've had students do that many times. They forget they're flying the localizer. Does that answer that question?
Yeah.
Okay, very good. So the question that I asked a moment ago was, how do you identify a lake? And the answer to how to identify a lake is a couple different ways. I'm going to show you through two ways to identify lake. And this is presuming no GPS. If we have a GPS, your GPS just tells you. So it's very simple. Lake is on a outer marker, which is it's a little ground-based station, a little box on the ground that shoots up a signal vertically. And when you fly over it, your radios can pick up that signal, and it will take in the airplane instrument panel. There is a let's see here, marker beacon instrument. How do I find that? Let's see if it shows it. Yes. In the airplane, a little blue light right there will start to flash, and you will hear just dashes. So dash, 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 like that, like doo, 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 right? So that's what you'll hear. Make sense?
Yeah, but also pretty much like the ILS. So in both cases, we get the auto marker at the
Yes, both
at the
cases.
final fix,
But
basically.
there's a difference. There's a difference. Two things. One thing, you can also use this crossing radial. So I think John said the crossing radial. When you cross that radial, you can identify lake as well. Cool. Great. However, on the localizer, you did not start descending right here. You waited until you were at lake to begin descending.
Mm.
That's one of the differences. So you stay at 27 until you hear the outer marker or you cross the radial. That's number one. Second thing is once you cross lake, what do you do? Once you cross lake, you descend to 1400. Those are your minimums. That's your minimum descent altitude. So you would simply drop down and descend. Now, if you calculated a glide angle to the runway and you had a continuous descent and you just set your autopilot to 500 feet per minute or something, then you might, make a continuous descent down to the runway or something close to it. However, for purposes of conversation, you can immediately descend down to 1400 and you can stay level at 1400 all the way to your missed approach point. But here's a question. Where is the missed approach point on the localizer approach?
Either your minimums or if you say your timer from final approach fix to miss approach point.
I'm sorry, say that
You're
again.
going 90 in 3 minutes. Sorry, that's it. Go ahead. So from your final approach fix to your missed approach point, if you're going at 90 knots in 3 minutes and 24 seconds, that's your missed approach point. Or you can look at your minimums.
Correct. So the box down here shows your final approach fix to missed approach point. That is how nearly every precision or non-precision approach has a missed approach point based on the distance between your final approach fix and your missed approach point, which can be based on time. It could be based on a GPS point. It could be based on station passage. It could be based on crossing a radial. It could be based on DME. It could be based on a variety of things. But typically, in this case, on this approach, the missed approach point is based on your ground speed and the time. So once you cross lake and your marker beacon is beep, 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 it's beeping at you, and you cross the radial, you descend to 1400. Well, you immediately start your timer for 3 minutes, 24 seconds. Descend down to 1400 and stay level at 1400 until the timer expires. When 3 minutes and 24 seconds expires, which will be about right here, because the distance is 5.1 miles at 90 knots, should take you this long to get there, then you would execute the missed approach procedure. So it's several more steps in the ILS. The ILS was very simple, It was just join a localizer, join the glide slope, fly the glide slope, and then at 1208, go missed. Very simple. But on the localizer, it's different. The localizer approach was fly level at 27 until lake, then descend to 1400 while starting your timer for 324 right there. Stay level at 1400 until the timer expires, and then go mist. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, that's very interesting. Very good.
Hey, I'm glad that was helpful. Does anybody else have any questions on that point? Adela, you raised your hand.
No, not a question. I just wanted to mention during an ILS approach, if I didn't want to cut you off, but I think John also should know if you're on an ILS approach and your glide slope fails, then you refer to your localizer minimums.
Yeah, that's true. That happened to me once, actually. I was flying the ILS into John Tune Airport. I'll pull up the plate so you can see that. I was flying at the John Tune in Nashville. I'm sure some of you guys have probably flown if you've flown anywhere in Tennessee. I was flying this approach at night in a Piper Archer after having gone missed at my home airport because the ceiling was too low. So I requested the ILS into tune, runway 20, and I came in and I was at Baikal inbound, and I was level at 2700. And I tuned the localizer, and the localizer was alive, but the glide slope was showing a flag, an in-out flag. So I waited a minute to see if it would come in or out, because sometimes the signal can be glitchy, and the glide slope just might not work that day. But I didn't see any NOTAMs. Then the NOTAMs were not saying there was a glide slope failure. So I stayed level, and then I began descending down to 2500. So I said, well, whatever. So I descended to 2500 and leveled off there. And I stayed at Twitty. By the time I got to Twitty, I realized my glide slope is not working. This is a problem. So I said, well, I can just descend down to my localizer minimums and then, tell our traffic control what happened. No problem. So I still had the GPS, so I didn't need to time or anything, and I had DME for my missed approach point. So I descended immediately to 1100. Who can tell me what's wrong with me doing that? What's wrong with me descending to 1100 right after Twitty?
Yeah, I think you're gonna bust the altitude restrictions for joggies in that case, right? Because it's gonna be a
Exactly.
problem, and you might
That's
hit something.
That's correct. So I started descending to 1100 because I was a little bit flustered. My head wasn't in the right place. I had just gone missed somewhere else, and now the glide slope's not working. My head wasn't in the game. I was just fatigued. I was very stressed. So I just descended to 1100, and I happened to glance down at my approach plate just to make sure I didn't miss anything, and I caught that the altitude here was 1560. I think I may have flown as low as 1400, maybe, when I noticed how low I was. So I immediately, oh crap, I climbed the airplane back up to 1560. And as soon as the GPS flipped, then I continued down to 1100. I don't know how close I was to hitting anything, but, you know, I don't know. But I know I survived. But I should have checked that. So if you switch from your localizer or ILS to your localizer, I highly recommend that you either go around, just go missed approach, because it's not worth stressing over something that you haven't briefed, right? It's better just to go around and try again, burn some extra gas if you have it, or do what I start to do now, and that is whenever I'm flying an ILS approach, I always look at my crossing altitudes as well, just in case. I just know where it is. And I also recommend that if you're flying an ILS approach, it's a good idea to, if you have a time, for the localizer, which this approach does not have a timer, but let's say it did, it said FAF, to map down here, and it gave you, 90 knots is, 3 minutes and 12 seconds or something like that, right? That you would go ahead and start your timer at the final approach fix, even though you're not required to, just so that if you have to shoot the localizer, you already know what your time is. Pretty good idea. So those are some of my suggestions for ILS versus localizer. Was that helpful?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah.
Sure, no problem. All right, got some more people that just joined the call. Welcome for those who just came in. Let's see here. Chat is saying you can't descend until past V. When did they say that? 3 minutes ago? So that's advisory. It's advisory. The VDP is an advisory point. It's actually not regulatory. Now, I can tell you, I do not recommend at all descending beyond minimums past the VDP or be up before the VDP. It's not a very good idea. However, it's not regulatory. It's only advisory. That being said, Marco, do you know what this is here?
Yeah, that's the visual descent point.
Okay, and what is the visual descent point? What's the purpose of it?
If we have runway visual ahead of that, we can descend.
Yes. So basically, if the airplane is leveled off here at your minimums of 1100, say you descended from here to here, whatever, you followed your step downs, right? And then you get to your minimums. And let's say you see the airport right here. A VDP tells you that you should stay at 1100 until you reach 2.9 miles because there may be obstacles in this area that you might hit if you were to descend below minimums before here. So they're basically suggesting that you wait until the VDP, and then once you're at 2.9, then begin your descent to the runway because you won't hit anything on the way down if you wait until after the VDP. That's that. Now, the next point on VDPs is I like to use a VDP actually as a recommended missed approach point. Not missed approach point, but missed approach decision point. And here's what I mean. Before everybody starts yelling at me saying, oh, it's not the missed approach point, I understand it's not the missed approach point. The missed approach point is 1.1 miles from the tune localizer. I understand that. However, if I'm flying the Citation and I'm coming into John Tune Airport and I find myself having to be level at 1100 right here, I understand completely that I can continue flying level all the way until 1.1. We agree with that. However, let's say I see the airport, I see the runway. Let me bring the thickness down here. Let's say I see the runway, right here, just before the missed approach point. Do you think it's a good idea for me to take a $2 million jet with 11 people in it and chop the thrust levers, dump the flaps, put the speed brakes on, and then try to slip it into the runway right here at such a steep angle? It's not a very good idea. It is not safe to descend past, it is usually not safe in a high performance aircraft, so especially a jet, to descend past the VDP to the runway. This is much too steep. Not safe. It's better to say, you know what? I'm stable here, stable here, stable here. But if I can't see the airport by right here and make a stable descent like I should, it would be a better idea to simply stay level at the MDA or start climbing to your missed approach altitude and then execute the missed approach procedure once you hit 1.1. Does that make sense?
So the VDP, is that aligned with the puppy lights or not really? Because at that distance, probably you can see the puppy lights to guide yourself, no?
The what lights?
The puppy lights?
Oh,
The
the PAPI
runway?
lights.
Yeah.
I don't know. Let's see. This airport does not have. This airport has PAPIs. Has PAPIs right here. The VDP has nothing to do with the PAPI lights. The VDP is just saying that if you were to be level at 1100, let's see here, that if you are level at 1100 right here, this is the point where you can make a stable descent to the runway. That's all it's saying. The PAPI light may be higher, you know, it may be shallower, it could be anything, but the VDP is simply saying that at this point, you should be safe to not hit anything coming down to the runway. There's no obstacles right here that you're going to hit on the way down, but there may be obstacles over here. So don't descend here because you might hit this right here. Instead, wait until you are here. That way, you will not hit. You won't hit anything right here. Cool. All right. Good question. John, do you have any comments on that?
Yeah, the only thing I'd add is you go on, especially 135, 121, it's a requirement to land from instrument approach in every op spec I've ever worked for, that you have to be in a normal position to land. And so if you go past the VDP, you'll be actually breaking the regs because your op specs are part of the regs. And if you wait till the missed approach point, if there's a VDP, because there's no way to get the jet down, as you were saying.
Yes, exactly. If you look right here, 91, 175. Let's see, 91, 175. What's this? C1 says that you may not descend below the DA or MDA unless the aircraft is continuously in a position from which a descent to landing on the intended runway can be made at a normal rate of descent using normal maneuvers. And then if you're flying 121 or 135, that must be able to put you down within a touchdown zone. So, for example, normal descent rate using normal maneuvers. Well, what's a normal maneuver, right? I mean, I slip every single day, right? But does that mean that you should come in high and slip every single approach in the Piper Archer if you go past the VDP? Well, that might not be for everyone, right? I've done it before and it was, wasn't unusual for me. I was perfectly stable. But how many of you honestly feel comfortable slipping from the MDA just to land, a little bit long? It's probably not safe, right? So I would not attempt anything like that without the extreme proficiency in those types of things. And even then, as a professional pilot myself, and John will tell you the same thing, and just because we can doesn't mean we're going to do it. Remember, you can pay attention to me on this one, is a superior pilot uses his superior judgment to avoid times that might require him to use his superior skill. So the best pilots are smart enough to not do something stupid because they know they can hand fly the airplane. They know they can crank and bank and do all the great stuff, but they're smart enough to know it's not worth it most of the time. So they'll try to be smart and avoid it. In fact, I tell people this all the time. This is very important. If you are excited while you're flying IFR, you are doing something most likely wrong. You should be pretty bored. You should be pretty bored. Now, I understand stuff hits the fan sometimes and you have a new approach and you get busy sometimes. Sure, I understand you getting busy, but if you're always like trying to cowboy yourself around while you're flying instruments, you're doing it wrong. Instruments should be as many straight lines as possible with as little movement as possible to get from A to B safely. If you want to go do lazy eights, or in chandelles for commercial maneuvers, then by all means, go do that on a visual day, but keep your instrument flying boring and bland. Planned everything out ahead of time so much that even if you have a change in plans, that you already are aware of the flight enough to be able just to, okay, we'll change this to this and we go fly this now. That's that. So good stuff. Questions, comments, concerns. They can keep moving forward. What's another topic that you guys really want to hit to today? Don't be shy.
I'll let someone else go because I think they're tired of hearing my voice a lot.
No, trust me, they're tired of hearing my voice. That's the one they're tired of hearing. Like, will this guy ever shut up? Oh my goodness. Like he could have said that in 5 words. He used 400 instead. Hey, I'm an external processor. What can I say? All right, questions. Let's see here. Keith, you haven't said anything. What you got?
I'm just listening along right now. Really good stuff. Maybe give me a minute. I'll think of something.
All right, that's fine. And you can also type it down in the chat as well. Let's see who else.
Essentially, Toby, since we're talking about approach, maybe I could throw something that a lot of people might find a lot of value about it.
Sure.
I don't know where most of you guys are located, but I'm up here in New York, Long Island. I fly out of a Republic Airport, and everybody keeps talking all the time how challenging it is to do a VOR approach to runway 6 at Brookhaven. And even my ex-instructor mentioned quite a while ago that if anybody can do that, they master the skills necessary for the IFR. So I didn't really look at the VOR 6 at Brookhaven yet. It might be interesting to talk about and see why people here consider that to be a challenging approach, if you like to go over that. So
Great question. Let's look at it now because this so far, just from what I see right now, it looks very easy. So let's look at it.
no, but for you, everything's going to be very easy.
Yeah, I mean, it looks very simple. So, I mean, I don't know. Let's look at it and see if we can find something that makes it difficult. All right, so everybody should be looking at the screen right now, and they should be seeing the VOR runway 6 into Brookhaven. Let's see. Mario, I see your question that you messaged me directly. If you could message that in the group instead of directly to me, that would make it easier for everyone else to see. All right, so looking at this is the VOR 6. Oops, let me change the color. This is the VOR 6 into Brookhaven. By the way, this is not me briefing an approach. I'm not necessarily giving you as my co-pilot a briefing. I'm just simply making myself aware. I'm studying this approach plate. I'm deciding how to fly this procedure. So let's go ahead and change the color to pink and bring the thickness up to 7.5 or 8 or 9. That's much better. Okay, so this is the VOR 6 at Brookhaven. We're just going to go ahead and presume that I am flying. I'm flying over here. So my airplane is somewhere, say, right here. That is where I am located when I have decided to fly this approach. So VOR 6 at Brookhaven, I'm thinking, okay, how do I fly this procedure? What's going on? What's happening? So looking up here, I see, okay, I've got a VOR that I'm going to be flying from. This is the Calverton VOR, 1455, easy. The approach course is northeast bound, cool, and runway 6, so it's 042. Plenty long runway, all that stuff is great. Notes, this doesn't apply to me. And then local altimeter not received, use altimeter setting at ILSIP and increase the MDAs to increase them all by 40 feet. Okay, cool. Nothing in the notes applies to me right now today. Looking at my runways, I've got approach lights into my landing runway. Cool, that helps. The missed approach stuff, I'll look at that here in a minute. But for right now, let's go ahead and just go to the plan. I'll give you guys a pro tip. You can read the missed approach stuff right now if you like to. That's totally fine. Me personally, I tend to read it last because think about it. the next thing that I'm going to do, like the last thing that I would do on an approach is execute the missed approach procedure. So if it's the last thing I say, it's the first thing that I'm going to remember. So think about that when you're briefing your approaches. And there may be other techniques. This is just my personal method of doing it. So whatever. But looking at this now, I say, okay, I am located here. How do I fly this? What's happening? Well, so far, I see my initial approach fix is at Masty, and it is not something that I can navigate to right now directly, because all I have in this airplane is a single VOR receiver. So I'm going to say I have no DME, okay? I'm going to use this. Can I fly this procedure with one VOR? And that's it. All right. And the answer is yes, and I'll show you how. So I'm going to navigate to Calverton because I see that I have a feeder route that goes to Masty on the 222 radial at 1900 feet. So I will fly that radial all the way to Masty. How do I find where Masty is? Well, Masty is where the 222 radial intersects the Deer, is that Deer Park? Is that what VOR that is? I don't know how I knew that, but okay. So it intercepts the Deer Park 107 radial. That's Masty. Cool. So I'm going to fly that all the way out at 1900. I'm going to write that down here. So 1900. Then once I cross Masty, I can descend to 1600. So that's what I'll do. Once I hit Masty, I'm going to execute a course reversal. Now the course reversal is done as a hold in lieu of procedure turn. So on this particular approach, let's see here. On this procedure, I'm coming in this direction. So that would simply be a parallel entry or a teardrop. I personally prefer parallel entries. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to fly outbound for 1 minute. After 1 minute, I'm going to turn and intercept. I'm going to change this to a slightly different thickness so it's easier to see what I'm doing. There we go. I go out, turn in to like this. Is everyone following so far? Okay, I'm doing that at 1600. Now, as soon as I intercept this radial inbound, I'm going to wait until I cross Masty again. How do I know I'm at Masty? Because of the 107 radial that I would cross right here. Simple. So when I see that I have crossed that radial, then I can go to my
Bobby, you need the second VOR on the airplane, right? To know that you crossed the radio.
You can either use a second VOR, or if you're quick enough, you can switch between VOR radials with using one receiver. That can be difficult, just doing it so quickly. Pressing your standby button and then switching frequencies and tuning it, that can be difficult to do quickly, but it's possible, still possible. In fact, what I might do is I might fly this procedure on the flight simulator just to show everybody how I would do it, and I would record it. What I would do is once I'm inbound here, I can descend to 1400. See? So I will descend to 1400, and when I cross Masty, then I can descend to my minimums, which in this case are 620. So I'll descend to 620, and I will level off at 620. Now, I don't have DME. I'm just using a VOR, so I can't use the VDP. So I'll just level off at 620, and I'm going to wait. Now, one thing that's important, since I don't have DME, is I have to start my timer when I cross Masty. So when I hit Masty, several things happen, right? I first went out, did my course reversal, descended to 1400, turned back in. When I cross the radial, what do? I start my timer. Whoops. Start my timer for 2 minutes and 44 seconds if I'm at 90 knots, and then descend to 620. Then I level off and I wait. Once my timer expires, then I execute the missed approach procedure, which is a right turn to intercept the 222 radial at 1600, back to Masty, and hold. So let's break down what is difficult about this procedure. Okay? So I'm going to clear all these things out. The difficult part on this procedure depends on what kind of navigation equipment you have in the airplane. If I have DME, it's slightly easier because I don't have to switch between one CDI and another. Trying to wait for radials to cross and center and things, and it can be difficult. Or, worse off, I'm not having to wait for, to switch between one and the other so quickly. I don't have to turn this to 222 and then press a standby button to transfer the radio frequencies, only to have to immediately flip it back to 107 to see how close I am. And then when I know I'm there, then get back to 222 and switch the frequencies again. It can be a pain, right? But it's what you have to do, if you have to follow this procedure, right? This is why you plan it out thoroughly beforehand if you can. So anyway, the difficult part is getting to Masty. Once you're at Masty, execute the procedure while descending. So there's descent there. Cool. Then once you are here and you made your turn back inbound, you descend again to 1400. So 16, 14. So 19, 16, 14. Then once you hit Masty, you descend to 620 and start your timer. And now all you do is wait for the timer to expire. And when it expires, you are here. And then you simply do a right turn to the 222 radial to 1600 and hold. So that's easy. You go right turn. 222 is, this radial here. Fly it to Masty and hold. The difficult part is descending each time and remembering to start your timer and remembering to switch the radial. It's not difficult. Like it's not complicated necessarily. It's just you have to do these steps here, and you have to do these steps here, and you have to do these steps here. If I have DME, it's slightly easier. It's just a matter of, fly to Calverton, from Calverton, join the 222 radial at 1900 until you hit 11.4 DME. Once you hit 11.4 DME, fly out for 1 more minute, turn to intercept, and descend to 1600. Once you turn to intercept, descend to 1400. So technically, I missed a step there, right? It would be very easy to fly this procedure and forget to descend to 1400. So remember that. So get to 11.4 DME, descend to 16, and time for a minute. On the turn inbound, go to 14, join inbound, time, and descend to 620, the same time, and then fly until you see 8.9 DME. That's your VDP. Don't descend until after that if you see the airport. And then once you see 7.3 DME, go missed, turn back to the radial, and hold. Is anybody completely flummoxed from this, or does it make sense how he broke it down?
Oh, it makes sense.
What do you think, Marco?
Yeah, to pay attention on every single step and track the radios and everything, and flying the plane at the same time, talking to the controller at the same time, and doing checklists at the same time with the foggers. It's it's gonna be a little tough. And to make things even a little more difficult, the runway, to my understanding, is not even aligned.
It is not. It's off by about 20 degrees.
Yeah.
Yeah. So difficult, it's very simple concept, but there can be some things that would make it challenging. One thing I recommend you guys do actually is this. Typically, we fly to airports that we know the approaches that we're going to shoot. We typically know what we're going to fly before we take off, usually, right? So how about we do this? How about we go do a notepad or do this even? You can swipe up from the corner of your screen on your iPad and notes comes up with ForeFlight right there. I can show you guys how to set that up later. But we can say, okay, step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, and write the steps down. Say step 1, go to CCC. 222 radial, 1900. Cool, do that. Step 2 is, at 11 MASTI, right? Which is 11.4 DME or whatever. Descend to 1600 and time for 1 minute. Right? Then you say at 1 minute, turn back to intercept and call it 360 heading or something like that. Turn right. Let's say a turn left, 360, descend to 1400, and intercept. Intercept is 042 inbound. Cool. Then at MASTI, start your timer. Descend to 620. Right? Or you don't have to start your timer if you're using DME, right? But just go ahead and practice that anyway, right? Descend to 620. And then step 5 is basically, wait for 7.3 DME. And if you have this pulled up on your iPad while you're looking at the procedure, it will help you remember what you're supposed to do.
And if you have like a full glass, the plane I'm gonna use for my check ride has a G500 TXI and a GTN 750. So is this approach? Is this procedure flown by GPS, and then when when I'm in the final approach course, I just switch to the green needle, or how it's normally done for the check ride when
Great
you have
question.
a full glass? Yeah.
You can fly, unless the examiner wants you to do the whole thing VORs, right? You can fly the whole approach, magenta from here to here. All of this can be magenta right here until you get to MASTI inbound, and then you have to be green all the way to here, missed approach point, and then you can go back to magenta again. The only time you have to use VORs is from MASTI until the map. Make sense? Yeah.
Yeah, it's gonna be a lot easier.
Yeah, and the thing is, dude,
Yeah.
GPS makes this so much easier, so much. Literally all you have to do on the GPS is get to Calverton. Heck, you don't have to get to Calverton if you're on the GPS. On the GPS, you can just go direct to MASTI, do a teardrop entry, and once you hit MASTI, flick over to green needles and descend, right? and fly the green needles until your missed approach point, which the GPS will tell you. And then at the missed, execute the missed procedure, and then flick back to GPS, go to MASTI and hold.
Oh, yeah, that's another question I was going to ask you. So, for example, if I'm coming from the south practice area, along the shoreline, the outer shoreline, so can I just come and do like a straight in, or I still have to do the procedure turn or
So nowhere on the page does it say no PT. So you cannot do a straight in unless you request it from ATC.
even though I'm coming from the south, from the
Correct.
southwest?
That is correct. It must say no PT, or you are receiving radar vectors, or ATC approves it for you to go straight in.
And let's say they didn't approve and they didn't request. How would you do it coming from the southwest?
I would do a direct entry. So like I just do a direct entry for like a hold and do that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's what I would do.
Yeah, it makes sense because you still have to be at 1,600 feet at the, hold on. And then you go down to 1,400 feet during the course reversal, correct? So that's why you need to do that to lose the altitude.
Yes. And guess what? Just in case you forget to descend to 1,400 and you end up being a little bit high, that's okay. Just descend a little bit quicker to your minimums and then level off. You could do that. Now, I recommend flying a continuous, excuse me, I recommend flying a continuous descent on final approach if you can. You can calculate what that looks like. It actually tells you right here, 2.96 degrees from MASTI to the threshold, which 2.96 degrees, you're flying at 90 knots, we'll say. So we would go to Documents, FAA, Digital Terminal Procedure Supplemental. The very last page, it shows your descent rates. So at an angle of 2.9, what was it? 2.96. We'll say that's between these two, right? Draw a line here, draw a line here. 90 knots is here. So about 475 feet per minute. You could just fly that after MASTI from 1,400, and that would take you smoothly all the way to the runway at 90 knots. Ground speed, ground speed. Does that work for you?
Yeah, looks good. Where did you go to find that the chart again?
This chart, great question.
Yeah.
So you go to ForeFlight and Documents. So, you know, if your documents in ForeFlight, right? You go to FAA. The very top, you'll see the Digital Procedures Supplemental, Digital TERPS. You click on that, and you go to the very last page. And it's there.
Yeah, I found it here. Thanks.
And there's a bunch of other great information on this page, all about PAPIs and approach lights and what all the lights mean. It's wonderful. This is really good information. You get a legend for all of the procedures, all the charts, what everything means. It's very, very good. You can even see the cold temperature airport things. You can see a circling approach categories and the speeds. You can even see the circling approach radius and the expanded radius and the RVR to visibility conversions. It's very handy. So I'm going to clear that out. Okay. Move on to a different question now. Who has a question or something that is in our training that they want to discuss? Anybody at all? Let's see here. Mario has a question.
Could you go?
See, Mario has a question here. Let's see here. Okay, Mario's question is when we are approaching and we are close to our MDA, do you suggest that we go around at 50 feet above the MDA or when we are at the MDA? Okay, so it's a great question. I'll draw this out on my iPad for you. Basically, should we have any kind of fudge room from our minimums? Is there any, room for error that we should calculate for or prepare for? And that's a great question, and I'll show you what I think we should do about that. So let's say that the minimum descent altitude is here, and our missed approach point, is there. This is our MDA. I recommend that we descend to our MDA, or if you're flying a continuous descent on final approach, you could calculate, the angle that you would fly here and whatever feet per minute, and then you would fly that to your MDA and then level off. Right here would be your VDP. That's your VDP would be there. But besides that, I would suggest we descend down to our MDA and we would level off at our MDA. However, you don't want to go below the MDA. See, a decision altitude is different. We fly our glide slope all the way until we reach a certain altitude, which is our decision altitude, at which point we get to that altitude and we say, okay, I must make a decision. Do I continue down or do I go around? Notice how we descend slightly below our DA during a go around. Does everybody see that? Right? We'll descend slightly below simply because we made the decision to go missed here, but we still had to take the yoke and bring it back and push the thrust forward and clean the airplane. And we usually descend a few feet while we're doing that. So there's no fudge room required on a DA. Simply at the DA, whatever altitude that is, make the decision and then follow with the decision. On the MDA, this is simply a minimum descent altitude. We should not go below this line at all. Now, let's say you're on your flight test and the airplane, you descend slightly because you were distracted with something. If you say, oh no, I descended, I'm low, then you say, I am low and correcting. You verbally say that to your examiner, and then you immediately bring the airplane back up to your MDA. That way you do not go below it again. See, this will not automatically fail you on a test. What will automatically fail you is if you descend and do not correct.
Toby, I'm sorry if I stop you, I'm sorry, but here in Italy, if you go below the MDA, you fail your check. It's not allowed to go below. That's why I'm asking you that. I'm sorry to stop you, to interrupt you. Just, to tell you how it's working here. Yeah.
Where are you training?
In Italy, in Rome.
In the FAA, you don't fail automatically. In the FAA,
Okay.
you fail if you don't correct things quickly. In fact,
Okay, I understand.
I'll show you here. In fact, this is for those who are in the FAA here. In the
Thank
FAA,
you, sir.
no problem. If we go here to the instrument ACS, it says here the standards for an approach. Let's see here. A non-precision approach. It says that you must be able to stay at or above the MDA plus 100 feet and minus 0. So don't go below the MDA, right? However, this is all in the skills section of an approach, of a procedure, a task on the test. Every skill follows along with the same logic for how you pass or fail a test. And the way that you fail a test is this. it says, if you will unsatisfactory performance, so you will fail, you'll get unsatisfactory if you consistently exceed tolerances. That's the first thing. So if we look back at the standards, the tolerance was plus 100 and minus 0. So if you go past this once slightly, that's not an automatic fail. It's an automatic fail if you continually go past these on multiple tasks and in multiple times. I know a person who, in fact, I did. I was flying my ATP check ride in the jet, and I went below the MDA by, 20 or 30 feet, and I said, oh, I'm low and correcting. And I corrected, and it was no problem. And that was on the ATP check ride. And the minimums are much tighter. So there's that. The next thing it says here is this, and just in case you didn't believe me there, I'm not saying I'm just making a joke. It's not about you believing me or not, but just in case you didn't click there, it says you will fail if you fail to take prompt corrective action. If you don't take prompt corrective action when the tolerances are exceeded, you will fail. So they're actually expecting you. When they say when, they didn't say if tolerance are exceeded. They said when. They're expecting you to mess up. The test is expecting you to mess up. So when you mess up, take corrective action quickly and you'll still pass. If you don't do that, you will fail. That's how it works in the FAA. So that's that. Now, if we go back to here and you're asking, or not here, I'm sorry. If we go back to here and you're asking, okay, well, can you go below or whatever? You're gonna mess up. If you go below slightly and you correct it immediately, it shouldn't be a problem. But in your country, maybe they're more strict. I don't know. But I will say, if you're not sure and you want to make sure that you do not bust that requirement, then I would say keep the MDA as the absolute lowest you go, and maybe say, let's say you have the MDA plus 100 feet, right? You have this gap that you can stay into. I would suggest descending down to half of that. So say 50 feet above, and just level off here and stay there. If you stay there, that way, if you get a little bit lower accidentally, which you shouldn't, but if you did, you're still within the tolerances. But even then, I'm not sure what the Italian standards are, but I will say in the FAA, if you make a mistake, you can fix it. But if you don't fix it, you're going to fail.
That's what I would do though. 50 feet before my MDA or DA, I start leveling off. At 90, 500 feet per minute should be okay. Works like a charm anyways.
Exactly. And when I'm flying, I always start my level off about 100 feet above the MDA, but I don't necessarily level off 100 feet, but I simply start to slow my descent so that when I get close to the MDA, I can be, at the MDA or maybe 10 or 20 feet, 30 feet above the MDA and just kind of stay there. But in the real world, I go down to the MDA and I just stay there because think about it. In the real world, if I go below the MDA by 50 feet, what am I going to do? I'm going to add power, pitch up slightly, and fix it. So the test is simply a test to see how do you fly in the real world. If you don't correct it in the real world, you won't correct it on the test, and you're going to fail.
Okay. Does that differ from DPE to DPE? Because here in New York, everybody says that, yeah, you have some margin for tolerances, except the minimums. You bust the minimums, it's a failure, like for sure. That's why in the school, everybody keeps a practice of keeping, even bugging sometimes the 50 feet above the minimums, just to not even be close to take a chance to bust a little bit the minimum so that the DP will fail. So so I don't know that's what people say here all the time, and they get us very scared when it comes to the minimums. Don't bust the minimum.
I mean, here's the thing. If you're that scared of busting the minimums, don't bust the minimums. Go 50 feet above. I mean, it's very simple. It's a matter of will they fail you or will they not? They shouldn't. It says here on the test standards are what rule the DPEs. If the DPE goes against the test standards, then he should not be a DPE, right? But that's what it says. I teach my students to level off slightly above the MDA. They can descend to the MDA, but I tell them to make sure that they do not go below, right? And if they do, what do? They correct it. See, that's just it. That's just that. You correct it. You correct your mistakes. I'm trying to find anything in the standards that says otherwise. I taught. I was.
And let's say if you bust a little bit, but you correct it right away, you did everything. Let's say someone did everything exactly like you said, and the DP decided to fail that applicant because of that. Is there any argument to go against that failure and trying to revert that based on what you're saying, or it's the DP final word and that's it?
Well, the DPE can do what the DPE wants to do, right? If they want to fail you, they can find a reason to fail you. And it's not hard to find a reason to fail somebody. Here's the thing. Be conservative and level off high. That's okay. There is an argument though. The argument is consistently exceeding tolerances and not taking corrective prompt actions. Like that's what it says. Like the test standard literally tells you that you are not going to do perfect, and not perfect also includes the MDA. However, if you do something that is unsafe and you do not fix it, you will fail. And one of the most unsafe things you can do is go below your minimums and not fix it. I mean, if I was your DPE, we're on a test, and the minimums are 1,000, and you're flying the plane, you're doing what you're supposed to do, and then you drift down to 950 or 900 for a few moments while you're checking your radio or something, and then without me saying anything, you notice it and correct it quickly, very quickly, and you tell me I'm correcting this. I'm not going to fail you. But if you start drifting 100, 200, 300 feet, I mean, you're really off. Because it depends on how far above the ground you are, right? If you're down 300 feet above the ground, 400 feet above the ground, and you're off by 200, well, that's half of your distance from the ground. That's very close, right? But if it's just 100 feet or so, and if you correct it, I won't fail you. But if you don't correct it, or you consistently do things that are unsafe, like if I can tell that you're just not paying attention and you're not safe in what you're doing, you're consistently screwing all this up badly, and it goes against standards consistently, then I would have to fail you.
And
So
one last question about this. Does that apply only for the instrument or the check rides? Because also a lot of people keep complaining, not complaining, but they keep mentioning that the commercial check ride, the power off 180, if you don't hit the point, that's it. It's a failure right there.
yeah,
So I don't know if
for
there's
every
a
check ride.
if that applies. I don't know.
Yeah, it's for every check ride. Now that being said, on the power off 180, you have to be -0 plus 200. So you know what you do? You land within that tolerance. This is what you do. If you don't land short, I mean, here's the thing. Which is safer, to land short or to land long? Land long, right? So don't land short. Here's a story. On my commercial check ride, single engine, I was flying my airplane because I have a Cessna 172 that I fly around. And on my check ride, I was aiming for the runway. So let's say the runway is, right here. And I was aiming for the second center line stripe. Why not the 1,000-foot marks? I don't know. I was stupid, but I was aiming for the second center line stripe. That's what I wanted to land on, right there. So I was coming around on my approach, and it's all looking good, and it's descending, and I found myself too low. The glide path would have been, here, and I was, down here. It was much lower than I needed to be. And I was a little bit slow too. So what I did is instead of trying to, pull the airplane's nose up and try to, stretch it and try to make it, I knew I wasn't going to make it. I would eventually stall, right? But I fly gliders and sailplanes as well. So I learned from my glider flying that I could reduce my drag and increase speed by lowering the nose and getting into ground effect. So that's what I did on my commercial check ride. I lowered the nose and I actually went towards the ground while I was low, built up a bunch of speed, stayed down low, and I was flying probably 50 feet above the ground, 200 feet in front of the runway. It was low. It was weird. And I kept it in. I built a little speed, kept the speed down, and right about here, the airplane wanted to settle down and land in the grass. And I said, nope, we're not doing that. So what did I do? I have manual flaps in my plane. So I had my hand on the flap handle and I went click to first 10 degrees. And the airplane went whoop, climbed up a little bit. So I let it go a little farther. And it started to want to sink again right here. And I said, nope. So I went click, second notch, and it went whoop. It does it again. Starts to go down. I go click, whoop. And then eventually, the last one, like 100 feet before the touchdown point that I was going to make, it started to sink again. And I put in my last notch, 40 degrees of flaps. And I went down, went up, whoop, and I went boom, right on. I couldn't have been 10 feet. It was exactly on the point. I mean, if I wanted to land, say, if I wanted to land, you know, right here, I might have landed right here. It was beautiful. It was right on the money. And as soon as I touched down, I was like, I'm almost there, almost there. I was like, yes, yes, yes. The examiner was like, man, you almost screwed that one up, didn't you? And I said, I know, but I didn't. I didn't screw it up. And the examiner he laughed. That was pretty funny. He was like, man, you're really good at this stuff, aren't you? And I was like, I don't know. You tell me, man. Like, I didn't fail it. Okay, we're good. And it was really funny. So you fly, you do what you gotta do to make the airplane land where you want to land. If I would have landed short, well, I would have not made it. There was no way I could correct that, right? But if I landed a little bit long, there's some things I can do to help myself stay safe, like, putting more brakes in or dumping the flaps quicker or whatever. And here's the thing too, if you do a perfect commercial check ride, or a very good commercial check ride, you're doing very well, and you land slightly short of your point on the test, like just, 20 feet short, 30 feet short, he's probably not going to fail you, honestly. He's probably going to be like, you did really, really well on everything else. And you did not consistently exceed tolerances. You exceeded them once on this one right here. You just messed this one little thing up barely. That was not consistently exceeding tolerances. And you know what you could have done to correct it. You verbally corrected it. Like, you're probably going to pass. So don't stress out too much. Just fly the airplane well and do what you would do in the real world. I'm correcting. I messed up. I'm fixing it. I don't know. It's really easy. So does that make sense? Wonderful. Any more questions, guys? I'm going a little bit late right now because we had some mess ups earlier and people didn't make it and whatever. So I've decided to give a little more time. So what other questions we got? Things we can discuss, instrument related, anything. Let's see here.
Could you walk through a back course?
Bat course. We do lost comms, sure, and back course for DA, you can descend below 1200. Yeah, TDZ, yes, you can do that. You said back course or course reversal?
Course reversal is fine.
Okay. All right, course reversals are the easiest thing you're ever going to do in your entire life, instrument flying. So this is going to be painfully easy. All right. I'm going to use this in stick figures. I like stick figures. If we cannot teach instrument on stick figures, then we should probably do something different. Like go be a a boat captain or something, But we're on a course. We're flying to a VOR. Or maybe, we're flying from a VOR. It doesn't really matter, right? Doesn't matter at all. But you're on a course. And you are going this way. Whoops. You're going this way. And you decide, you know what? I kind of want to go this way. I kind of want to go the other way. Like I would prefer to traverse in this direction. So what do? You do a course reversal. And course reversals are very simple. There's 3 types of course reversals that you can do normally. There is a standard course reversal, standard reversal, which is, your typical, you're on your radial, whatever you're doing outbound. And then whenever you want to start the procedure, you just turn 45 degrees, time for 1 minute. At the end of that 1 minute, turn around and join the radial inbound. Easy. 45-degree standard course reversal. That's just it. Like, let's say this is the 360 radial here. You're flying 360 outbound. You start your turn. So remember the 6 T's, right? 6 T's. So turn. Cool. Time. For 1 minute. Cool. Twist. Twist from the 360 outbound to the 180 inbound now. Turn time twist, throttle. You don't need to do anything there. Talk, no talking. Tracking, no tracking need to be done right now. You're just flying outbound for a minute. At the end of your 1 minute, turn around. No need the time. You've already twisted. No talking, no throttling. All you got to do is join that radial and fly it in. That is a standard course reversal. Painfully easy. Now let's do another course reversal. Let's do an 8260. So an 8260 course reversal is the same type of thing, except not as easy when there's wind or whatever. So an 8260 is basically when you want to do the procedure, you turn the airplane 80 degrees of heading change. So like not quite 90, right? But like 80. 80 degrees of heading change. Standard rate or whatever. And as soon as you roll out on 80 degrees of heading change, as soon as you hit 80 degrees, immediately turn the airplane the opposite direction back to your inbound course. This number of degrees is 80. The number of degrees from here to here is 260. So it's called an 80, 260 course reversal. Same thing. You start your turn. No need the time. You got to twist, right? So twist to, 180. Throttle talk track. Just once you hit 80 and start turning back to 260 or start turning back towards the radial, just intercept and fly it inbound. And now you're going the other direction. Really easy. Third type of course reversal is called a teardrop. Same idea. You are here and you want to go the other direction. So what you do is when you are ready to start the procedure, you turn 30 degrees offset of your heading for 1 minute. And then after that, you turn back around and intercept. And of course, do your 6 T's, make sure you twist once you start turning right here. That way you can join the 180 inbound. Make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah.
Really, the last one and the standard are pretty similar. It
They're pretty
seems
similar.
just
45
yeah.
versus 30,
Sure.
Yeah. Now I'll show you I'll show you one more type of course reversal in the form of a hold. So holds are very easy. Holds are just perpetual course reversal, because think about it, right? Let's say that you're flying in an airplane, going this direction towards the VOR, but you want to kind of hang out at the VOR, right? The easiest thing to do is to go to the VOR. Once you hit it, just like turn around, fly this way long enough until you're able to kind of get back to here where you started, and then just like join that radial. That's all a hold is. Literally, dude, that is a hold. That's it. Go watch the past videos that we've done on the past week or so of training. I've got so many lessons on holds. I forgot how many I've done. It's tons of them. Like this is the
Yeah,
number.
yesterday's was really good.
Yeah. So I mean that's really all you got to do is that. So
Okay.
but I will say my favorite type of course reversal when it comes to a hold is the parallel entry.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, we're doing our a turn like this, right? So airplane's over here, or it could be straight even. I mean, it doesn't really matter. We'll do it from over here first. You go to the VOR. Once you're there, simply turn out and follow this radial. Technically, it's called a parallel because you would cross the VOR. Once you cross it, then you would turn, and technically you're paralleling. You're not like on the radial technically. Okay. But bear with the analogy here. You're basically on the radial. I mean, if you're close enough, you're on it, right? Especially this guy, he'd be on the radial. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Right. So anyway, you just parallel it for, a minute or whatever it is. And then you just do that and then join it inbound. I like that the most because I know where I'm at. I'm navigating on a radial. I'm not just, out here, free birding out here in outer space. Like, where am I exactly? I'm like, oh, well, I know I'm not going to just turn back in and it would work. But, this has more time away from the radial than this one here that puts me on the radial, and I quickly turn back around and get back on it. Remember, what do we want?
Stick figures.
What was it? Yesterday we did the chant. Who remembers what we did yesterday? I said, what do
Oh,
we
it
want?
was
Let's do it. Let's do it right
I
now.
need a hint. Yeah. Yeah. Straight lines.
What do we want? We want straight lines. When do we want them?
All the time.
Now.
Now.
Okay, let's all unmute our microphones and play a little game here called Humor Toby for a second. Okay. When I say, what do we want? You're going to say straight lines. When I say, when do we want them? You're going to say now. Okay. So what do we want?
Straight line.
Straight line.
When do we want them?
Now.
Now.
Meow. Okay, that's when we want them. Okay. IFR is so easy. If you just try to think about it in straight lines and radials that you can actually navigate to. That's it. Right? No one likes turning. Think about it. If you really think about it, no one likes turning in IFR. It's so much better when you're flying a nice straight line to a runway. Like if I could take off from this airport here, oops, wrong marker, from this airport right here and fly a straight line to this airport right here, and then it perfectly lines me up on the runway with an ILS, that would be beautiful, right? Oh, by the way, that's why RNAV was invented. Because people didn't like having to fly from VOR to VOR to VOR to VOR to get to, an airport right here. They much preferred just being able to fly a straight line to where they were going. So they invented RNAV, which artificially moves VORs along points along your route that you can plug in, and you can fly direct to these artificial VORs that navigate you right to the airport. If you don't understand how this works, that's okay. There's a video that I did on it in one of the classrooms. But everything's about straight lines. They're more efficient. They're easier to fly. I mean, that's just it. The only time I don't want to fly straight lines is if I'm flying a Citabria or a Decathlon or an extra 300. Then I don't want to fly any straight lines. I want to be flying all loops and rolls and, spins and stuff. But that's that. Good question. Any other questions? What else do we got? Anybody?
Probably if the idea about IFR is to fly straight lines as often as possible and prevent to keep doing turns, then why there are so many like course reversals and for you know, like all over the place?
Sure. Great question. So I'll show you an example of that.
Remember the VOR6 we were talking about, like coming from the southwest? Why I couldn't just go straight in? It's
Sure.
just, you know, no, I have to do a loop. You know?
Exactly. I'll show you. So course reversals exist because we don't want to turn. Now you're like, what does that mean? What do you mean we don't want to turn, so we're going to make people turn? Now, what does that mean?
Exactly.
So yeah, draw this out. Let's say that we're coming in from, now this direction, this will be easy. This will be an easy one to understand, but let's say this one. We're coming from this direction and we're going direct to Masti. Is it safe to hit Masti at, 1900 or whatever altitude ATC gives you, then
Yes.
and then immediately cross it, turn back this way really sharply while descending to 620 and timing if you need it, just to get back to here and go into the runway? That's not very safe. That's not very safe at all, right? That makes no sense. That's too much turning, too much navigation. It's too much zigzagging along straight lines instead of flying straight lines. We agree with that. That's too steep of a turn.
Right.
Now, let's go the other side of things.
You mean you talk about the approach itself, right? The way it's set up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, here's another point. Well, what about, say right here? Why would this be unsafe to go from here to straight in? Well, it's awfully steep. It's a very steep angle, 90 degrees, right? Think about it. The airplane's going to hit that point and then fly past it while turning. Parallel is here. They're going to have to turn again to intercept.
Can you show we know?
We don't have a picture. Sorry.
Yeah.
Oh, you don't have a picture? I'm so
Yeah.
sorry. I'm
No,
so
we're
stupid.
seeing you, not
That
No
was
problem.
that was my bad. It's getting late, all right? I'm kind of tired, so. Okay. Let me just start that one over. I was like, what are you talking about? Okay. We're coming in from up here, okay? From here to here. It's obviously not a good idea to go straight in because we would be turning like this and like this and this. Too much turning. It's disorienting. Who would want to fly that? Nobody. Right? It's too steep.
Oh, but that makes sense. But what if you come from the southwest,
Well, I'll show you.
which lines you up perfectly on a almost like, let's say, a 45-degree? If you come from the outer shoreline and then you turn left to intercept the 042 radio, and then you just go down.
Sure.
But no, they make you to do a turn, you know?
Sure, let me show you. So if you go direct from here to Masti, you fly direct to Masti, which is right here. At that point, you are at whatever altitude air traffic control told you to stay at. Let's just say it's 2000 or whatever, 1600, it doesn't matter, right? You're at this altitude. Not only are you probably not at the lowest altitude for Masti that it's designed to be at, right? You're probably not in a position to immediately hit Masti and then turn to join. You're probably going to have to go past it slightly again and then join, just because you're not navigating on a radial. And remember this. I clear it out. Which keeps me on this radial? To be from here and staying on the radial, or to come in from this way, and then let's say I start turning right here. Well, I'm still going to go past it and have to rejoin like this, right? So there's a bit of a gap here. This gap is kind of like a a discontinuity. It's like it's a continuity error in my navigating here, right? It's more time where I am not 100% sure where am I. Think about it. Anytime the VOR needle is not perfectly centered, you're always a little bit unsure of what's happening. Would you agree with that? Right? It's very simple. It's just very simple like psychology. It's like, okay, we want the needle to be nice and centered. So the way we get that needle nice and centered is instead of crossing it and arbitrarily turning, especially you're arbitrarily turning on the final approach segment, the section of the approach that is most important that you stay perfectly on that line all the way down because you're so low to the ground. It's very important that you be accurate here. And this here is not accurate, but this is accurate. Now, of course, we have GPS now. We have different things. If you went GPS direct to MASTI and it requested straight in from air traffic control, the GPS would automatically turn the airplane slightly earlier. That way, it would line you up perfectly here. And that would be okay, right? But even then, you would have to switch from GPS to VLOC right there. And that's going to add more workload to what you're doing right in the middle of a turn. So it's just not very stable. It's not consistent. It doesn't make your life any easier. It actually makes your life harder. So why do we do a course reversal? Well, course
Yeah, but
reversals.
what if you, just a quick question, what if we intercept the radio like a little bit further out? You know, you see the outer shoreline?
Yes, yes,
So
perfect.
we just, instead of going straight to Masti, going straight to the radio to 222, and then we turn, intercept that radio, and from there we go straight in.
Like this.
Yeah.
This will be very good. Now, you still technically, unless air traffic control clears you on vectors or tells you no, that you can go straight in, you have to do a course reversal. But remember, air traffic control radar vectors cancels out course reversals. So if they vector you to the radial, then once you're on this radial and they say you're 3 miles from Masti, cleared for the approach or whatever, right? They vectored you. So that means you can just go straight in. And guess what? That works because you're stable all the way in. That will be fine. That's the only way that I would think that that would be a good idea. But otherwise, so vectors would be good. I like that. However, if you were coming in from over here, you would not be stable right here to be able to immediately turn. You would be offset. So the best thing to do is to just continue with your direct entry, get out this way, which allows you to then join this radial. See, you can join the radial back in. Now you're on the radial that you want to be on, and then you can go straight in. So that's why course reversals like that exist, is to make sure that you are completely on that radial. Because when you get out of a hold like this and you go back inbound, you're on the radial established before Masti. Straight lines. Make sense?
Yeah, and for the sake of the exam, the check ride, so if the ATC gives you vectors, so you're just lucky, or you have to, or the DP might ask you to do the actual course reversal.
If the ATC gives you vectors, there's no course reversal required. Now, yeah, if ATC, remember that's vectors to final, right? They have to be vectoring you to here. And technically, they have to vector you to a point at least 1 mile from Masti, which is called the approach gate. And they have to give you no greater than 20 degrees of intercept angle inside of 2 miles. And outside of 2 miles, they can give you 30 degrees of intercept. That's called your vector to final rules. That's the air traffic control rules. You don't necessarily have to know that. I have a really good video on this on my Instagram that I made. And you can watch that. It's really helpful. But yeah, so there's no vectors, there's no procedure turn required. Now, if air traffic control was over, you were over here, and they said join the fly heading 180 and join the 222 radial to Masti. Well, they're giving you vectors, yeah, but they're just taking you to the radial. And obviously, you would need to do a course reversal here. Yeah. Barbie, give me a bear. Go ahead.
Oh no, is that still my name?
It is.
How do I change that? Oh no, no. If anyone, I'll go last. If anyone has a question, actually, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Oh, it's okay. That was basically the end of that one. So go ahead.
In regards to contact and visual approaches, when do we usually use those? Because I've never experienced any of that, and I've heard like a bunch of stuffs about it, but I just want to know like your knowledge more on that partake. Basically, when do we usually use a contact approach or a visual approach, basically on an IFR flight?
Sure. So contact approaches, you're probably never going to use unless you're flying helicopters because they're kind of sketchy. Basically, a contact approach is where you're basically telling air traffic control that you have a mile visibility and you'll stay clear of clouds and you will fly low level and use just ground references that you know of in order to get to the airport safely. And it's scud running. It's basically the equivalent of scud running in IFR, in IMC.
Okay.
You can just read the aim on that. That's don't fly contact approaches unless you are like, a helicopter or something. It's not a good idea.
Which one was like by a request by a pilot? Is that the visual one? Or...
Contact.
Okay. Okay. All right.
Yeah,
that's basically it. I have
Now-
nothing else.
Now, a visual approach, right? That can be assigned by ATC or it can be requested by the pilot. And there's actually a post in the community where you'll see the post where the guy Tim Haller posted, it says, "I've fallen and I can't get up," or something like that. It's kind of a funny title or whatever. But he asked a question about visual approaches, and I responded in there with a long thing from the FAA all about visual approaches and what the requirements are for them.
Okay.
It's really good. But basically, if the pilot, let's say I'm flying in to John Tune here, I'm flying into Tune, and I see the airport right here. I can tell the controller, maybe he was going to vector me for the ILS for runway 20 or something. And I say, hey, approach, 17 blankety blank, whatever tail number, airport in sight, John Tune's in sight. And they'll say, number 1, 2, 3, 4, cleared visual approach, runway 20, contact tower 119.45. So if you're cleared for the visual, that means that you are cleared to turn, descend, climb, whatever you got to do, remain clear of clouds in order to
Once that you
get to the airport. And sometimes I've even been cleared like this. I'll be going direct to the airport like this, and I'll be cleared for the visual, and I'll just descend down to pattern altitude, and I'll just join the downwind, and then of course contact tower, before the delta, whatever, and then just clear to land. That's it. Visual approach. It's the IF, and the only reason that you would do a visual approach instead of just canceling IFR and just joining the pattern is because you still want to have IFR separation. So they still have to make sure that you're at least 3 miles clear, 1,000 feet above or below other traffic. It just protects you more.
But you rarely do that, right? If you're on an IFR flight plan, basically.
I do it all the time.
Oh, okay.
Visual approaches are very common. When you fly in the real world, you will get a lot of visual approaches because you'll listen to the ATIS and they'll say your runway 20 visual approach in use, you know, reback hold short instructions, advise on initial contact, whatever, you know, alpha or something, right? So if they're landing visual, unless you request an ILS or an RNAV, you're going to get a visual approach, and it's honestly a lot easier. I mean, think about it. If I'm just flying from John Tune back home to Dixon, where I'm currently sitting right now, as you can see, right?
Mhm.
If I'm just, you know, flying over there, I'll call the airport inside about 5 miles out, and they'll say, Roger, cleared visual approach in Dixon Airport. And then they'll say report cancellation of IFR, you know, through flight service or on this frequency. And I'll say, Roger, clear for the visual. And then I'll go to I'll go to 122.8, you know, and or whatever, and I'll just join the pattern, do whatever I gotta do. I'll land and I'll call approach on the phone and say I'm canceling IFR. Or maybe if I know there's no traffic and I want to go ahead and cancel now, I'll just go ahead and when they say report the airport in sight, I'll say, hey, approach, you know, 1234, we're gonna cancel the IFR. And all right, IFR cancellation received. Have a nice day. Cool. And I just, you know, go in and I land. That works too. Remember, you're only flying instruments because you can't see anything.
Yeah.
Technically. Now, I like flying instruments, even if I can see stuff, just because it improves the traffic awareness and terrain. And I'm basically guaranteed to have ATC hold my hand the whole way. So it's safer. It's objectively safer. But at the end of the day, it's just an airplane. And it flies the same in the clouds as it does in the sunshine. And it lands the same way on an ILS as it does on a pattern. If I see the airport and it's clear enough and I'm like, all right, we're good to go. Appreciate your help, buddy. We'll see you. Click, cancel IFR, and I just land. Remember, the whole point is not to fly IFR for sake of flying IFR. It's to fly from John Tune to Dixon and not die in the process. That's the whole goal.
Have one takeoff and have one landing.
Exactly. Preferably, you know, in the same little flight. Marco, go ahead.
So, for example, if I'm flying IFR to an airport and right before their arrival, they clear me for the visual, so I cannot consider that arrival, that approach for currency, right? So let's say I need one more approach to current for the next 6 months, but they give me a visual, so that won't apply. I still have to somehow do another approach.
Yeah, visual approaches don't count. You have to fly an instrument approach procedure. A visual approach is an instrument like flight rules concept, but it does not count for your approach currency. So, I mean, that's just that.
6 hits.
And the visual approach is the same thing like a VFR. You just join at the downwind and then you turn base and finally exactly the same thing, or you
Yeah.
follow. Yeah.
You do what you want to.
Okay.
You know, sometimes if I'm cleared for a visual approach, let's say I fly into BNA, you know, the big airport in Nashville here, and they say, hey, the airport's, you know, I'm on downwind, and they say, hey, the airport is on base. The airport's, you know, 10 o'clock and 8 miles, report in sight. And I say airport in sight, and they'll say cleared visual approach runway 2 center. And I'll say, Roger, cleared visual approach runway 2 center. And I'll just, you know, I'll join final for 2 center. I'll fly visually, you know, I'll just, you know, I could leave the autopilot on. I could, you know, I could plug in the ILS if I wanted to plug the ILS frequency in, localizer, and fly the glide slope. I could fly that down, but I'm responsible for my own traffic, not my own traffic. I'm responsible for my own terrain and clouds and that kind of stuff. Now, if air traffic control said, "Hey, you know, I'm right here, and there's another airplane that's right here," and he tells me, "Hey, traffic, you know, 11 o'clock." 5 miles, 737 northbound on the ILS runway 2 center, or on the visual 2 center, report in sight. And I say traffic in sight. They can say, follow that traffic, cleared visual approach runway 2 center. In which case, I'll follow him in and I'm clear for the approach. But now I have to maintain my own separation from him. So I can get as close as I want, technically, but not hit him because that's stupid. Why would you want to do that? So. You know, I'm all about not hitting other airplanes while I'm flying, or while I'm on the ground, for that matter.
Mhm.
Cool. Any other questions? Are you guys thoroughly bored and burnt out and ready to be done?
I'm not.
I can ask a lot of questions, but I don't know.
All right, cool. Let's see if we have any written down here in the chat, and then we will see what we got going on. contact approach is like special VFR. Lost comms, a question that was asked. So for lost comms, go watch the video we did yesterday. We talked a lot about that, actually. It was the one, or day before yesterday. It was the one about routing. We talked about lost comms in that one. But I can give you the very short version, which is basically this, is in lost comms. I'll go to my iPad again. In lost communications procedures, the regulation is 91-185. Don't ask me how I know any of this stuff. I've just been flying long enough to memorize stupid regulations and wish I did that sometimes, but whatever. It's helpful.
185?
91-185 is lost comms, which is conveniently located to 91-175, which is the regulation on what you have to see to go below minimums, like stable approach, lights, runway environment, whatever. So 91-185, lost communication procedures. It's actually kind of outdated and kind of complicated now because the FAA is like that sometimes. But, here we are. So 91-185. Basically, when it comes to lost comms, you have to decide how you're going to fly in two different ways. The first is your route. The second is your altitude. So for route, we have AVEF, A-V-E-F. That's an acronym we're going to fly. For altitude, we have an acronym called M-E-A. Not to be confused with this, not this kind of MEA. Totally different MEA. Okay, that's completely different. Does not count. MEA is a different acronym. So we'll start with route. If you lose radio communications, you fly what you were assigned first. If they did not assign you anything, you fly whatever you were being vectored to. So if ATC was giving you vectors, and they say, fly this heading, vectors for the ILS approach or whatever, then guess what you're going to do? Fly the ILS approach. Easy. Next option is expected. If air traffic control told you to expect something, so for example, citation 550 Charlie Echo, expect direct Long Beach Airport. Then what am I going to do if I lose radio communications? Someone tell me.
Direct Long Beach.
Darn straight. That's exactly what I'm going to do. Now, if they didn't give me anything else, I fly whatever I filed. Cool. Easy. Anybody confused on that? No? Awesome. All right. For our altitude, this is the more complex one, slightly. For our altitude, we have to fly the highest of these three. The first one is our minimum instrument altitude for segment of flight. What that means is whether it is an MEA, whether it is an OROCA, whether it's the MOCA, or etc., whatever, right? Whatever the minimum IFR altitude for our flight segment is, we have to fly, that if it's the highest. The next is whatever we're told to expect. So expect, and then assigned. So let's say air traffic control said maintain 3,000, expect 5,000, 10 minutes after departure. And then let's say that's your MEA on your route, or let's say the minimum altitude on this segment of your departure or whatever, right, is 4,000, right? Let's say it's 4,000. Then what do you fly, right? So people would think, oh, well, I'll just fly 5,000, right? It's the highest one. Well, maybe. What time is it though? Let's say we lose comms 6 minutes after departure. and we're maintaining 3,000, right? What altitude do we go to if we lose comms 6 minutes after departure?
3,000.
We go to 4,000 because
4,000.
the minimum IFR altitude in our segment of flight is 4,000. Now, what happens when we hit 10 minutes?
5,000.
We go up to 5. That makes sense, right? Let's look at a practical example of that. Now let's go down here to Dallas, Texas, because why not? Let's say that we took off out of the let's say we took off out of the Fort Worth Meacham Airport right here, and we are flying on the J-Pool 9 departure, which goes from basically vectors to Maverick VOR, and then basically you fly like some radials and whatever, and you do some turns and whatever, right? And let's say that the MEA on this route here is 2,500. Let's just say that, okay? So you take off out of Fort Worth Meacham. ATC says, all right, you cleared the blankety blank airport. I don't know. Maintain. Oh, that's kind of funny. Look at this. This airport's name is Prop Wash. It's kind of funny. Huh. See? Prop Wash Airport. I just noticed that. Sorry. Distracted. My bad. Squirrel. So anyway, cleared the blankety blank airport, whatever, as filed, maintain 2,000, expect 8,000, 10 minutes after departure, right? So maintain 2. So assign 2, expect 8 in 10. Cool. Nice. We take off out of Fort Worth Meacham. Flying along. We've been flying we're flying direct to Maverick, but we haven't reached Maverick yet. We lose comms right here, and we've been flying for 7 minutes. What altitude do I go to? Oh, and by the way, I'm currently at 2,000. Like, that's where I am when I lose comms, at whatever I was assigned. Who can tell me?
2.5.
Not 2.5. What do we think?
8,000, no?
8,000.
Oh, we don't fly 8,000 either. Remember, the acronym is MEA, so minimum IFR altitude, if that's the highest, or you're assigned, or sorry, expected, sorry, or assigned. So we were assigned 2,000, right? We get that. That's where we're at right now. We're expecting 8,000 in 10 minutes, but it's 7 minutes in, so we got 3 minutes to go before we can go to 8,000. We can't do that one. So what is the minimum IFR altitude for our current segment of flight? We are right here. We are not currently on this route yet.
It will be minimum sector altitude, no? 10,000 we have, no?
Not quite. So let's talk about minimum IFR altitudes for a minute. This is something that you guys have heard before, but you may have not fully recognized, like, oh, this is how this works, right? Am I currently on a route right now? Am I on a published route?
You can go to the minimum off-road altitude.
Exactly.
Oh, the Oroka.
Exactly. It's like,
I was
oh, I get it. The Oroka in that sector is 3,700.
I was so concentrated on the 2.5.
Exactly. So 3,700 is the Oroka, which is what we can climb to. So we would climb to 3,700. Now, once we hit Maverick VOR, gonna change the color so I can see what I'm doing here. Once we hit the Maverick VOR and we are on this route, we can descend to 2,500. However, by the time we get to Maverick, it's been 10 minutes. So we can climb to 8, which is obviously the highest. Make sense? That's about as complicated as that gets. Now, there's one more complication I want to mention to you. Let me show you. This is highly complicated, but I'm going to simplify it because kind of what I do apparently. We're going to go down here and we're going to look at the approach into Chino Airport. And before I go on this, people are starting to drop out of the chat. I'm going to go ahead and send you guys the link real quick. Uno momento, por favor. Let me see. Hide meeting controls. There we go. If you guys could be just absolute real G's and go ahead and leave a testimonial in the link I just put in the chat, that would really, really help me out on getting all this stuff going. So here's the thing, we got 7 people in the group right now that are on the call, like right this second. We've had as high as 30, which is great. I would like to see like 50 or 100 people in there. Is what I want. I want more than that. I want people going back and forth. I want to be able to have a community where there's, you know, a list of questions that we talk about beforehand. That way we come to the calls, questions already prepared. I can give a better lesson because I prepared the lesson ahead of time. And we're able to get everybody's questions answered instead of bouncing back and forth for 2 hours wondering what's happening. These calls are normally 1 hour, but lately I've been flexible. So, and today it's Saturday, who cares? I can go a little longer. So, and remember, if you leave me a testimonial video and the written testimonial on the same link, and if you go to the school, you'll see a feedback form. Fill out the feedback form to help me know how I can improve the program, and I'll give you a free one-on-one call. Hour or whatever it takes. Like if you want a mock check ride, I don't care. I'll give you a mock check ride. So do that. Fill it all out, make a good video, you know. Hey guys, this is the greatest program ever, or Toby sucks, or whatever. I don't care, right? Do that, and you'll get a free one-on-one. So those 3 things. Moving forward, back to this. This is probably the craziest lost comm scenario that you could find yourself in. Let's say that we're flying up here from, I don't know, we're flying from your Grand Canyon Airport down to Chino, California. And we filed this Victor Airway here to Paradise VOR, and from Paradise direct to the Chino Airport. You lose comms up here, and then you're following your airways, your altitudes, whatever. And you get to Chino, and the weather's bad, and you need to shoot an approach. But you are 40 minutes early. Now, you're wondering, why does that matter? The reason why you have to update your ETA and update your airspeeds on your flight plan when you're flying IFR is because the rule is that when you lose comms in IFR and you are going to an initial approach fix to, you know, land, the rule is that when you get to your initial approach fix, you have to hold at that approach fix and continue holding until you have reached the estimated time of arrival on your flight plan. Raise your hand if you knew that. Yeah, it's not a very commonly known fact. The rule is that you would have to hold at your initial approach fix until your ETA. It's in the regs.
Toby, if you say you have to hold, but I think there's a regulation 91.3, something like that. Safety of flight, right? So
That's
if you're an
actually PIC
IMC,
responsibility, but yeah.
what's that?
91.3 is PIC responsibility.
Okay. So
Same
whatever
thing.
is safe for me, then I don't know. If I will hold, I would shoot the approach if I lost comms.
I agree with you. That's what I'd do. But I'm just telling you what the reg says. But this is actually part of the discussion because you bring up a very, very good point. Um,
Toby, where do you hold? Do you hold at the initial approach fix or the holding where you do the missed approach?
the initial approach fix, the IAF.
But that's not a published approach, right? I mean, a published hold.
Well, let me pull it up. It's not, well, you would hold if the initial approach. Well, hold on, let me pull up the plate real quick, just so I can see what we're talking about. ILS 26 right. Boom. Okay. So the idea is that you get to paradise. What do you do? Right? So think about this. Your route of flight is that you would fly along the airway, to paradise. And then what did you file after paradise? Did you file an initial approach fix or no? No, we didn't. We filed from paradise to the airport. So my question is, what do we do? Do we fly from here to paradise to the airport, and then we go back to the initial approach fix and then hold there for 40 minutes? That's kind of stupid, right? Especially think about this. What if we don't have a GPS? What if all we have is a VOR? We can't navigate to an airport from a VOR at the air. We can't do that. You know what I mean? There's no waypoint that we can navigate to at the airport. So we couldn't do that without a VOR or without a GPS. It's kind of stupid too. So it's like, well, is paradise an initial approach fix? No. So this goes back to why I always tell people, file to an initial approach fix. That way, if you lose comms, you know exactly how to fly an approach. Now, this being said, paradise is a feeder route that goes on the 052 radial to Casby, at which point you could, do a course reversal and, hold if you needed to there, right? Cool, you could do that, right? However, think about this. You're 40 minutes early. There's tons of airplanes flying all around here. This is Southern California. I mean, this is an absolute disaster of airplanes.
Congested airspace. So.
Yeah, and there's so much airspace. I mean, the Los Angeles Bravo is an absolute bear. And yeah, I could tell you all about the LA Bravo, and I could tell you all about the San Diego Bravo, because when I used to work for Pilot Edge, we used to have people on the training flights fly through the corridor, and we would judge them and give them like training, and they would basically we would watch them the whole time, and if they did it correctly, we would tell them. If they didn't and they busted the airspace, we would say, "Hey, you failed. You busted the airspace or whatever," right? And they would learn that they'd figure it out eventually. So it can be a royal pain. And the guys that did really poorly, I would not be as easy on them. I would say, okay, I want to see if you actually understand how this works. So I would wait to the last second to give them a clearance and see if they would turn to avoid the airspace or if they would continue or whatever. Doesn't matter. Back to the point is we're 40 minutes early, but the only thing that I've lost is my headset. I can't hear anything, right? But my transponder still works. So if my transponder still works, does ATC know where I'm at? If my transponder, the little box with my squawk code in it, 4362 or whatever, which now would say 7600, right? If my transponder is still sending information to ATC, they know where I'm at. That's just how that works. You probably have ADSB too, right? So as long as this box is still working, ATC knows exactly where you're at, which I consider to be an updated ETA. That is my personal interpretation of that. I'm like, you know what? The whole reason the ETA is there is so that they can know when you're going to arrive. But if they can see you on their radar screen, they know where you're at. So who cares what your ETA is? I'm not going to hold. They know where I'm at. Does that make sense?
Also, in that case, even if you're 40 minutes early, you can still just go and land the plane. You don't need to hold and wait.
Yeah. And plus, you don't want to clog up their airspace, which is really dangerous. you know, for 40 minutes. That's stupid. So I would continue in and I'd shoot the approach. I wouldn't hold. So I would go down to Paradise. I would fly outbound to Casby, do my course reversal. From Casby, I would fly the ILS in and I would land. I would not wait.
91.3.
91.3.
I had that on my stage check. And then I just told him, all right, this is unsafe, because he had basically the same scenario. And I just told him 91.3. It's my responsibility, whatever is the safe option for me, because it's kind of pointless, especially if you're on IMC and you wouldn't want to be going on a hold for like 30 minutes to 40 minutes or whatnot.
Yeah,
you know?
don't want that.
Yeah.
So that's what I would do there. So does everybody understand kind of how the lost comm stuff works here?
Yeah, I have just one question. So let's say you're still like 40 minutes out coming to the airport. You don't know yet what's the approach that they're going to give you, right? Because you're still far. It could be an RNAV, it could be ILS, could be anything, right? So, and then you lost the comms. So, how can I explain this? For example, in your example, right? So you decide to pull the ILS for 26 right.
Mhm.
It had to be an ILS, or you could do the RNAV approach and go from there. Like it's up to, at that point you lost the comms, right? You come to the airport, you don't know the approach that they would give you because you don't have the comms anymore. You're the one choosing the approach plane.
Yes.
I'd choose the one that takes me the closest to the ground.
We fly the clearance limit, right?
So basically, you can choose the RNAV and then you just go inbound, and that's it.
Yeah, you can do whatever you want.
Yeah, preference, I guess.
Yeah. So that's what I would do. Is I'd fly whatever gets me down the lowest and go from there. You fly the RNAV if you want to. You can fly the VOR approach. Does not matter. And you won't be able to tell what ATC would want you to do because you don't have the radios. So there's that. Also, the number one reason that lost comms happen is because people forget to turn their radio volumes up. So
I have an emergency in my belt. I lost all the electrical systems on the plane. It's all full glass and everything poof, went off on me, and I was VFR, of course. So I did what I learned in the school. It was like maybe 2 months after I got my private. So I was still a little bit fresh of everything that the school taught me. You know, I overflew the airport 1,000 feet above the parent altitude, waiting for the light gun signals. They gave me the light gun signals. I did everything correct. So I cannot imagine. And then later on, the problem was the cable from the battery. It got unplugged. So transponder, everything was off. You know what I mean? So I cannot imagine something like that happening if I was on a IFR and in IMC.
That's crazy.
that kind of stuff happens. Does anybody else have any other questions? Preferably something short because I'm ready to go take a break.